Right, now this is a weekend trip from Scarborough down to Grimsby and back, and we stopped off on the way back in Bridlington. Now, this is us on the outward leg, just approaching Flamborough Head, which you can just see there. Now, you need to be quite careful passing this because it is a bit of an infamous tidal race, and in the wrong kind of conditions, it can be very dangerous. And the last time we went down here, there was significant swell, but it wasn't half as bad on the day that we went past. We did stay a little bit further out, and I think that together with the relatively calm conditions made a difference. Now, we didn't take an awful lot of footage in and around Grimsby because the visibility wasn't very good, and we were quite busy with navigation issues. So nothing from there, I'm afraid. But this is the spinnaker run on the way back. So this is from Grimsby up to Bridlington. And this was a lovely, lovely leg. Now, we ran the spinnaker from probably just north of Spurn Point, all near enough all the way up to Bridlington. The wind did kick up a little bit more, and that's when we had to take it down. But very interesting leg. Now, the thing about a spinnaker is you can't just set the autopilot and expect it to stay up and just keep your same heading. You need to actively sail to make sure that the spinnaker doesn't collapse. So there's constant small movements and sort of tweaking of the spinnaker, which makes it all really interesting. So it was a great leg and a great sail. But if you look at our spinnaker now, it's actually an asymmetric spinnaker. The one side is lower than the other side at the bottom. Now, that should be just attached to the bow, but we just fly it with a pole like a normal symmetric spinnaker. It does maybe look a little bit different, but it seems to work just as well. I mean, maybe we could attach a line from the bow and just use it as an asymmetric and then not have to use the pole, but we've just never got around to that yet. But yeah, lovely leg, really good. And it makes the passage go very well because you're constantly working to keep your heading and your spinnaker inflated, so it was great. Good conditions for it. And there's a couple of wind farms. I think you probably saw one in one of the earlier shots there, just off Withersea. And we stayed in from those. There's a couple of cardinal marks that you just need to keep to the one side of, but it's a pretty safe passage and very interesting sail. Now, this is the day after, and we're just leaving Bridlington. Now, there's quite a lot of wind here, although it's not obvious from the shot, but there's quite a lot of wind at the moment on the port bow. So all we had to do here was just reverse a little bit, and the wind just caught the bow and swung us round. We didn't need to do an awful lot else to actually turn. There wasn't that much room to move. The stern rather is only about 2-3 feet away from a fishing vessel, which you can't see right behind us. But it all worked out fine. There is actually quite a lot of swell in the harbour. You can see the masts going and all the other vessels moving around a little bit because there was quite a lot of residual southeasterly swell coming up the coast. Now, even in the harbour, there was a little bit of swell. It's actually windier than it looks. You can see some gusts going across the water there. But there's us just making our way down to the entrance to the harbour, which is just a bit further on down on the right. Past these fishing vessels. Right, now I was saying there was a fair bit of residual swell, and you'll see what I mean when we come to the entrance to the harbour, because it was fairly choppy. It's quite a narrow harbour entrance as well. Now, we approached this in the dark the evening before, around about, I think it was about 7:30, and the swell was even worse the evening before, so all we could see was an unbroken white line of surf as we were approaching the harbour, and it's quite intimidating because you can't actually see the entrance to the harbour until you're almost on it. So we were only maybe 250 metres away when we actually saw the entrance, and up until that point it looked like there was just surf breaking on the pier heads and getting thrown up into the air. So it was quite an intimidating sight. Now, there's such a degree of agitation that all the silt and sediment on the seabed has been kicked up, which is what is turning the sea that colour. But it changes colour about half a mile out, and it's a surprisingly quick transition. It goes from the muddy brown that you can see to its normal colour, but it's almost in the length of a boat. It's incredibly sharp, the change from one water to the next. But yeah, that's us just getting out of the harbour entrance. And luckily, there's not an awful lot of tidal set across the harbour entrance, so there's nothing that's going to throw you onto either of the breakwaters. You just have to gun your engine and aim for the middle and go for it. Almost built me coffee. Now that's us on the way back up. Still, as you can see, a bit of swell, but nothing too difficult. And that's Flamborough Head in the background on the southern side. Now again, we kept about a mile or two off, probably near 2 miles off. There's also a shoal that we're just north of as well, that we had to try and avoid. Because then, with any kind of swell, there is the risk that it could kick up quite a bit in terms of sea state. So we had to avoid the shoal that was just to the south, and then obviously keep a mile or so off Flamborough Head. But it all went very well. It was not bad at all. The tide was with us, which makes a big difference. So we had wind with tide, both going the same way, which makes for a bit of a more calm sea. Now this is round the corner from Flamborough Head. Now we were expecting the wind to have died down, but it did the opposite. This wind was solidly in the 30s all the way up to Scarborough from here. So that's a proper force 7. A near gale. Now, the swell wasn't that big. It was probably 2 meters, maybe 2.5. It's difficult to see from the camera now. All videos tend to flatten the sea state out, and it's hard to make out any definition. But I'd say it's about 2 meters or so. Now we're traveling along nicely. Now, as you can see, if you look at the dots on the mainsail just behind the mast, we did a small reef just shortly after this shot. Everything was under control, but we just felt there was a bit of weather helm, and it just didn't feel totally balanced. So we took in just probably a foot extra of sail, which you'll see in the next shot, and that made an amazing difference in terms of the boat handling. Now here the action of the mainsail tends to round the bow up into the wind, so that would be trying to turn us to port. The jib tends to throw you off the wind, which turns you to starboard. And if you balance them exactly, then the boat will steer herself. Now there, as you can see, those dots are right up by the mast, and just that small change made a world of difference. And from here on in, the boat pretty much steered herself. There was no weather helm. We could let go the tiller, and she just went to windward and kept the same heading. And as I say, that was in 30 to 35 knots of wind with about a 2 meter swell. And there she is, just steering quite happily herself. We had the main sheet all the way down the Traveller as well, and just that little tweak, plus the little bit of reefing, just balanced them exactly. So there she is, tramming along. Yeah, as I say, we thought that the wind would die down a little bit here, but it just picked up. Actually, it got stronger the nearer we got to Scarborough, the higher it got. And up towards Scarborough, it was 35 or so knots. But here it was just low 30s. There's the anemometer and the wind speed. So 31, 32, 33, just steady all the way up on this passage. So 4-7. I tried turning the camera around a little bit up into the wind right about here, just to try and give you an idea of the weather that was prevailing at the time. It's hard to see on a video camera swell and waves, but that sort of gives you an idea of what it was like. There she is, sailing herself again there. Me looking a bit pleased with myself. But I have to say thanks very much to Grimsby Marina for the welcome they gave us. They couldn't have done more for us. They're the most welcoming bunch of people. Absolutely lovely. They went out of their way to make us feel comfortable and do what they could for us. I've got to say, thumbs up. Absolutely brilliant night stay. Thoroughly recommend the place.